The morning sun cast long shadows across the military housing complex as Sergeant Emily A. Carter sat on her front porch, her calloused fingers absently scratching behind the ears of a massive German Shepherd. Rex's amber eyes never left her face, reading every micro-expression with the precision that had kept them both alive through 3 tours in. "Afghanistan, you always know, don't you, boy?" Emily whispered, her voice carrying the weight of memories that haunted her sleep. Rex tilted his head. His ears perked forward in that familiar gesture that said he was listening, really listening in a way that most humans never bothered to do. The neighborhood was quiet at this hour before the chaos of military life kicked into gear or other soldiers. "We're still sleeping off another restless night, but Emily had given up on sleep months ago. The nightmares came whether her eyes were open or closed, so she chose to face them in the growing light of dawn, with Rex, as her silent sentinel Rex had been. Assigned to her unit 4 years ago, fresh from canine training at Lackland Air Force Base. The handlers had warned her that German Shepherds could be stubborn, that building trust took time. But from the moment Rex looked into Emily's eyes, something clicked, a recognition that transcended species and training protocols. They were both soldiers, both carrying invisible wounds, both understanding that survival meant never letting your guard down. Their first deployment together had been brutal. The Taliban had been particularly active that summer, and Emily's unit was tasked with clearing compounds in Kandahar province. Rex's nose had saved them more times than she could counting, IEDs buried in dirt roads finding hidden weapon, caches alerting to enemy movement in the pre-dawn darkness. But it was more than his training that made him invaluable. It was the way he seemed to sense Emily's emotional state, positioning himself closer when her hands shook during briefings, resting his massive head on her boots during the long, sleepless nights when the mortar fell like deadly rain in his laid, stood up from the porch steps, her joints protesting. The movement at 28, she felt decades older, her body bearing the accumulated stress of combat and loss. Rex immediately rose beside her, his movements fluid and alert despite the early hour. "Come on, boy, let's walk." They moved through the quiet streets of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, their footsteps synchronized after years of partnership. Emily's mind wandered to the medal hidden in her bedroom dresser, the bronze star with valor that she'd never worn, never acknowledged, never spoken about to anyone except Rex during their long conversations in the darkness. The medal represented the worst day of her life, the day she'd earned it by action she wished she could forget. The day 3 members of her squad didn't come home because of a split-second decision she'd made. The Army called her a hero. She called herself a failure. The only one who seemed to understand the complexity of that contradiction was the dog walking beside her, who had witnessed every moment of that terrible. Derek suddenly stopped, his ears pricked forward, and his body tense. Emily's hand instinctively moved to where her sidearm would have been during deployment. Even here on a peaceful military base, the hypervigilance never left either of them. "What is it, Rex?" Cat darted across their path, disappearing into the shadows between 2 housing units. Rex relaxed, but his eyes remained alert, scanning their surroundings with the methodical precision that had been drilled into him through countless hours of training. Emily knelt beside him, cupping his face in her hands. "We're okay, boy. We're home." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't true. Home was something they'd lost somewhere in the dust and heat of Afghanistan. Home was something that existed only in the memories of who they'd been before the war changed them. Both. Rex pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture of comfort and connection that he'd never learned in any training manual. It was something uniquely theirs, a communication that transcended words and commands. "No, you're worried about me," Emily whispered. "No, you see, it's the way I'm fading, but I need you to promise me something, Rex. If something happens to me, if I can't fight anymore, I need you to make sure they understand the medal in my dresser. It's not what they think it is. It's not heroism. It's grief." Rex whined softly, a sound that spoke of understanding and concern. He'd been watching Emily's decline for months, the weight loss, the increasing isolation, the way she stared at nothing for hours at a time. Dogs possessed an intuitive understanding of human emotion that often escaped human perception, and Rex knew his partner was drowning in memories. She couldn't escape as they walked back toward the house. Emily's phone buzzed with a text from her commanding officer requesting a meeting. The military machine never stopped, even for soldiers who were clearly struggling. There would be paperwork to complete, briefings to attend, the endless bureaucracy that seemed designed to keep soldiers busy rather than help them heal inside. The house. Emily poured food into Rex's bowl and watched him eat with the mechanical efficiency of a soldier following routine. Everything in their lives was routine. Now meals at precise times, walks along familiar routes, the careful choreography of two damaged souls trying to function in a world that expected them to be grateful for their service, while ignoring the cost of that service. Emily opened her dresser drawer and stared at the metal case. The bronze star gleamed against its blue velvet backdrop, its ribbon pristine and untouched. She'd received commendations, by campaign ribbons, achievement medals, the routine recognition that came with military service, but this one was different. This one came with the faces of Corporal Martinez, Specialist Johnson, and Private First Class Williams haunting her dreams. Rex appeared beside her, his chin resting on the edge of the dresser as he looked up at her with those knowing amber eyes. "You remember that day, don't you?" "Oh, Julius," she asked. Quietly, "You remember the compound, the explosion, the way I froze when I should have acted? 3 good soldiers died because I hesitated for 2 seconds. 2 seconds, Rex, that's the difference between a hero and a failure." Rex's tail wagged once, a gentle contradiction to her self-condemnation in his simple canine understanding. Emily was neither hero nor failure. She was his partner, his pack leader, his reason for existing. The complexities of human guilt and honor meant nothing to him. Only loyalty mattered, only love endured. Melee closed the dresser drawer and sank onto her bed. Rex immediately joined her, his massive frame taking up half the mattress as he pressed against her side. This was their evening ritual, Rex serving as a living, breathing anchor against the nightmares that waited in the darkness. "What am I going to do without you when I'm gone?" Emily whispered into his. Rex's ears twitched and he lifted his head to look at her with an expression that seemed to say, "Who says you're going anywhere?" But Emily knew better. She could feel herself slipping away day by day, memory by memory, until only the guilt remained. The army had given her counseling, medication, all the resources they promised would help, but healing required something. She couldn't find forgiveness, especially forgiveness from herself, as sleep finally claimed her. Ow. Emily's last conscious thought was of Rex's steady breathing. Beside her, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest that had become the metronome of her existence. Tomorrow would bring another day of barely surviving, another day of pretending to be whole, while pieces of her soul continued to crumble. Rex remained awake long after Emily's breathing deepened into sleep, his amber eyes watching over her with the devotion that only a dog could offer. Unconditional, unwavering, and infinite. He didn't understand human concepts of heroism or failure, but he understood love, loyalty, and loss. And somewhere in his canine consciousness he sensed that their time together was growing shortened, the darkness of the bedroom surrounded by the quiet sounds of a military base at rest. A German shepherd kept a vigil over his broken partner, unaware that he would soon carry the weight of her legacy in ways that no training could have prepared him forth. Call came at 0347 hours on a Tuesday morning, the kind of pre-dawn darkness that military personnel knew intimately. Colonel Sarah Mitchell had been expecting it for weeks, watching. Sergeant Emily Carter's slow decline with the practiced eye of a commanding officer, who had lost too many good soldiers to invisible wounds. "Man, we have a situation at housing unit 247B. The MP's voice crackled through the radio. "Sergeant Carter." "She's gone, ma'am. Gone, ma'am." Colonel Mitchell closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of another name to add to the list of casualties who never made it home even when their bodies did. Emily Carter had been one of the finest soldiers in her command, a natural leader. Fearless in combat, devoted to her team, the Bronze Star, with valor sitting in personnel files, told the official story of heroism under fire. The reality was more complicated, as it always was. By the time the colonel arrived at the scene, the military and police had already secured the area. Rex sat outside Emily's bedroom door, his massive frame rigid. With alertness, a low whine emanating from deep in his chest, he wouldn't let anyone pass. He wouldn't respond to commands from handlers he'd known for years. How long has he been like this? Colonel Mitchell asked Staff Sergeant Williams, Rex's original trainer, since we arrived, ma'am. He's not aggressive exactly, but he won't move, won't eat, just sits there guarding the door, like he's waiting for Sergeant Carter to come out. Colonel Mitchell knelt in front of Rex, studying the intelligence in his amber eyes. She'd seen military working dogs bond with their handlers before, but the connection between Emily and Rex had been extraordinary, forged in combat, deepened by shared trauma, sustained by mutual understanding that transcended species. Rex, she said softly, she's gone, boy. Emily's gone. Rex's ears flattened against his head, and his whine deepened into something that sounded disturbingly like grief. Dogs weren't supposed to understand death the way humans did, but the keen intelligence in Rex's eyes suggested otherwise. The next 72 hours blurred together in a maze of notifications, arrangements, and the cold bureaucracy that surrounded military death. Emily's parents drove up from Nashville, lead-aged couple whose pride in their daughter's service was tempered by their obvious lack of understanding about what that service had cost her. She seemed fine at Christmas, Emily's mother Patricia said repeatedly. Quiet maybe, but fine. She always loved the military. This doesn't make sense. Rex never left Emily's side during the preparation process. The funeral home staff initially tried to separate them, but Colonel Mitchell intervened with a direct order. The dog stayed with his handler. They had served together, suffered together, and Rex had earned the right to say goodbye. Funeral arrangements for military personnel followed strict protocols, but Emily's case presented unique challenges. Rex's obvious distress, complicated logistics, and his refusal to eat or respond to anyone except Emily was concerning. The veterinary staff, we might need to sedate him for transport, suggested Dr. Amanda Foster, the base veterinarian. His grief response is severe and prolonged stress could be dangerous. No, Colonel Mitchell said firmly, that dog has been through enough. We accommodate him, not the other way around. During the preparation days, strange details emerged that painted a picture of Emily's final months. Her neighbors reported that she'd been giving away possessions, books, furniture, clothes, claiming she was decluttering. Her squad leader mentioned that Emily had been asking questions about Rex's care, wanting to ensure he would be properly placed if something happened to Hertha. Most puzzling discovery came from Emily's personal effects. Hidden in her dresser alongside the bronze star she'd never worn was a sealed envelope addressed simply to Rex's next handler. Inside, written in Emily's precise handwriting, were detailed instructions about Rex's care, his preferences, his triggers, and his unique behaviors developed during their partnership. But it was the final paragraph that stopped everyone cold. Rex knows what happened in Afghanistan better than any after-action report. He was there when Corporal Martinez, Specialist Johnson, and PFC Williams died because of my decisions. The medal they gave me should have gone to their families. Rex understands honor in a way I never could. Take care of him. He deserves better than I could give him, Colonel. Mitchell read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and placing it in Emily's service jacket. The Bronze Star citation told one story: heroic actions under enemy fire that saved the lives of 6 soldiers. Emily's letter told another, a split-second decision that haunted her until she couldn't live with the weight of survival. Rex seemed to sense the approaching funeral. With an awareness that defied explanation, on the morning of the service, he allowed himself to be groomed and fitted with his dress uniform, formal vest, and patches that designated him as a military working dog. But when Staff Sergeant Williams tried to load him into the transport vehicle with the other K-9 units, Rex planted his feet and refused to move. He wants to ride with her, observed Chaplain Robert Hayes, who had been working with Emily's family throughout the week. Look at how he's watching the hearse. It was true. Rex's entire focus was on the flag-draped casket being loaded into the military hearse. His body language spoke of determination. Ears forward, muscles tensed, amber eyes locked on his partner's final journey. Let him ride in the family car. Colonel Mitchell decided Emily's parents will understand. Patricia Carter initially protested. She was allergic to dogs, she said, and the car would smell like animal. But when she saw Rex's obvious distress, maternal instinct overrode personal comfort. Of course he can ride with us, she said quietly. Emily loved that dog more than anything. The funeral procession wound through Fort Campbell with military precision honor. Guard members lined the route, saluting as the hearse. Past Rex sat in the back seat between Emily's parents, his massive head visible through the rear window, creating an image that would be remembered long after the formal ceremonies. And Darlington National Cemetery had granted special permission for Rex to attend the graveside service, an unusual accommodation that spoke to the unique bond between handler and K9 as the procession entered the cemetery grounds. Rex became increasingly agitated, whining and pawing at the car door he knows. Patricia Carter whispered to her husband, "Somehow he knows this is the end." The chapel at Arlington was filled beyond capacity. Military personnel from Emily's various assignments had traveled to pay their respects. Combat veterans who rarely showed. Emotion sat with tears streaming down their faces as they remembered a soldier who had given everything, including her life, to the service of her country. Rex was scheduled to enter with the other military working dogs, but as the funeral director prepared to escort him to his designated spot, the German shepherd broke away from his handler and positioned himself beside Emily's casket. His body language was unmistakably protective, the same stance he had taken countless times in Afghanistan. "When threats approached their position, should we move him?" whispered Staff Sergeant Williams to Colonel Mitchell. "No," the colonel replied. "Let him say goodbye in his own way," as the honor guard folded the American flag that had draped Emily's casket. Rex lifted his head and released a sound that silenced the entire cupola. Long, mournful howl that seemed to carry the weight of every loss, every sacrifice. Every moment of shared service between a soldier and her canine partner, the sound echoed off the stone walls and settled into the hearts of everyone, present a final tribute that no human words could match. In that moment, Rex wasn't just a military working dog following protocol, he was a partner, saying goodbye to the person who had defined his world. But even as mourners wiped away tears and prepared for the final journey to the gravesite, none of them could have predicted what Rex had planned for the conclusion of Emily's service. Hidden in his behavioral patterns and his refusal to eat, in his protective stance beside the casket, was a final act of loyalty that would transform a routine military funeral into a moment of profound truth. The hearse began its slow journey to the burial site, followed by the family cars and the long line of military vehicles. Rex rode in silence, now his amber eyes fixed on something only he could see, carrying a secret that would soon reveal the depth of a bond that death could not break. The officers' club at Fort Campbell buzzed with subdued conversation as Emily Carter's former squad mates gathered 2 days before the funeral. These were men and women who had shared foxholes and firefights, who understood the weight of combat in ways that civilian counselors never could tonight. They wrestled with questions that had no easy answers. "She was solid in Afghanistan," insisted Sergeant First Class David Rodriguez, rotating his beer bottle between calloused hands. "Never saw her crack, not even during the worst of it. Hell, she saved my ass twice during that Kandahar deployment." Staff Sergeant Jennifer Chen nodded grimly. "That's what makes this so hard to understand. Emily was the one we all looked up to, steady under fire. Always had our backs. If she couldn't make it home," the unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Master Sergeant Tom Bradley, Emily's former squad leader, stared into his whiskey. "Y'all remember the Ghazni operation? The compound where Martinez, Johnson, and Williams bought it?" The table fell silent. Every soldier there remembered that day, the day Emily Carter had earned her Bronze Star and lost 3 friends in the span of 15 minutes. She was never the same after that. Bradley continued, kept saying she could have done something different, could have saved them. No matter how many times we went over the after-action report, she couldn't let it go. Rodriguez leaned forward. "What exactly happened that day?" "I know the official version. Led a flanking maneuver that saved 6 soldiers when the compound was overrun, but there's always more to the story." Bradley was quiet for a long moment, weighing how much to reveal. These were soldiers who had earned the right to know who carried their own invisible wounds from that deployment. "The intelligence was wrong," he said finally. "We thought we were hitting a weapons cache with maybe 2 or 3 guards. Turned out to be a Taliban command post with 20 fighters the moment we breached the compound. It was a shitstorm." Chin set down her beer. Emily was point on the entry team. Point and K9 handler Rex detected explosives in the main building, so Emily called for a route change. That's when everything went sideways, Bradley's voice carried the weight of memory. Enemy fire came from 3 directions, Martinez. Johnson and Williams were caught in a crossfire trying to reach the alternate position, but Emily got the rest of you out. Rodriguez said, yeah, she did. Rex found an escape route through a drainage tunnel that the Taliban hadn't covered. Emily laid down suppressing fire while we extracted the wounded. By the time the A-10s arrived for close air support, she'd held that position for 12 minutes against overwhelming Odd Staff's Sergeant Marcus Thompson, who had been silent until now, spoke up. 12 minutes doesn't sound like much to civilians, but in a firefight like that, it's a lifetime, Bradley finished. Emily and Rex saved 6 lives that day, but she never forgave herself for the 3 she couldn't save. Meanwhile, across the base, Emily's parents were sorting through their daughter's personal effects with growing bewilderment. Patricia Carter held up military commendations and awards that she'd never seen before, medals that Emily had never mentioned during their phone calls. Don't understand, she said to her husband. Emily was so proud of her service. Why did she hide all of this? James Carter examined his daughter's Bronze Star, reading the citation with a father's mixture of pride and heartbreak. Listen to this. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States while serving with the 2nd Battalion 502nd Infantry Regiment in Ghazni Province, Afghanistan. Sergeant Carter's heroic actions under intense enemy fire directly resulted in the survival of 6 wounded soldiers and the successful completion of the mission. This was a hero, Patricia whispered. But Rex, who had been lying quietly in the corner of Emily's bedroom, lifted his head and whined a sound that somehow conveyed disagreement. The dog knows there's more to this story, James observed. Colonel Mitchell had seen the pattern before. Decorated soldiers who couldn't reconcile their public recognition with their private guilt. She'd requested Emily's complete service record, including the classified after-action reports from Afghanistan, hoping to understand what had driven such a promising soldier to despair. The files painted a picture of exceptional service marred by survivors' guilt. Emily's squad had been tasked with high-risk operations throughout their deployment, and their success rate had been remarkable, but success in war always came with a price, and some soldiers paid that price long after they returned home. Dr. Amanda Foster, the base veterinarian, had been monitoring Rex's condition with growing concern. Military working dogs typically grieve the loss of handlers, but Rex's behavior was extraordinary. Hadn't eaten solid food in 4 days, responded only to commands related to Emily, and spent hours staring at objects that had belonged to his partner. It's like he's waiting for something, Dr. Foster explained to Colonel Mitchell. Not just grieving, waiting. I've seen dogs mourn before, but this is different. The mystery deepened when base security reported that Rex had been found in Emily's quarters at 0200 hours, despite being secured in the K9 kennels. Video surveillance showed him somehow manipulating the latch on his kennel door, a skill he'd never demonstrated before. What was he doing in there? Colonel Mitchell asked. That's a strange part, replied Security Chief Master Sergeant Lisa Park. He wasn't destructive, didn't disturb anything, just went straight to Sergeant Carter's dresser and sat there until morning, like he was guarding something specific. They investigated the dresser. They found Emily's Bronze Star case displaced as if it had been handled recently. The metal itself was undisturbed, but there were clearly dog hair fibers on the velvet lining. Staff Sergeant Williams, Rex's current handler, struggled to understand his charge's behavior. It's like he knows something we don't, he confided to Dr. Foster. He keeps going back to that dresser, keeps pawing at it. Yesterday I caught him carrying Sergeant Carter's dog tags in his mouth. Carrying them where? That's just it, nowhere specific. He just carries them around like he's supposed to deliver them to someone, but doesn't know who. The evening before the funeral, Emily's former squad gathered one final time, this time including Rex. The German Shepherd seemed more alert in their presence, responding to familiar voices and scents that connected him to his service. Daz Rodriguez knelt beside Rex, scratching behind his ears. You remember me, boy? Remember that time you found the IED that would have taken out our entire convoy? Rex's tail wagged slightly, the first sign of anything approaching normal behavior. He'd shown since Emily's death he was amazing over there, Chen said. Perfect record for explosives detection, never missed a threat. But the bond between him and Emily was something else entirely. Bradley watched Rex carefully. Emily used to talk to him like he was human, not just commands, conversations. She'd tell him things she'd never shared with us. What kind of things? Thompson asked her fears, her guilt about the soldiers we lost. Sometimes I'd find them sitting together in the dark and Emily would be crying while Rex just listened like he was her confessor or something. As the evening wore on, Rex's behavior became increasingly purposeful. He left the group and returned to Emily's quarters, positioning himself once again beside the dresser. But this time, instead of simply sitting, he began pawing at the bottom drawer, the one containing Emily's dress uniform and formal accessories. When Staff Sergeant Williams investigated, he found something that made him immediately call Colonel Mitchell. A small sealed envelope tucked behind Emily's uniform jacket, addressed in her handwriting to everyone who loved me. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that would change everything. By the time you read this, I'll be gone and I'll have failed you all one last time. I've tried to be the soldier you needed, the hero they said I was, but I can't carry the weight anymore. Martinez, Johnson, and Williams haunt my dreams every night, and I can't escape the truth. They died because I hesitated. Rex knows the real story. He was there when I froze for those 2 crucial seconds. He saw me fail when my squad needed me most. The Bronze Star they gave me belongs to the families of the men who didn't come home. Take care of Rex. He's the only one who never judged me, who loved me despite my failures. He deserves better than I could give him in life, maybe. In death, I can finally make one thing right. Tell my parents I'm sorry. Tell my squad I tried to be worthy of their trust. Tell Rex he was the best partner a broken soldier could ask for. Sergeant Emily Carter, 2nd Battalion, 502nd Infantry Regiment. Colonel Mitchell read the letter twice, then looked down at Rex, who sat perfectly still beside the dresser, his amber eyes fixed on her face with unmistakable intelligence. You knew, she whispered. You knew she was planning this, didn't you? Tail wagged once, not happiness, but acknowledgement. As the funeral preparations continued, word of Emily's final letter spread through the close-knit military community. The official narrative of heroism remained unchanged, but those who had served with her understood the complex truth that sometimes the bravest soldiers carried the heaviest burdens, that survival could be its own form of suffering, and that love sometimes meant letting go. But Rex carried a different truth, one that no human could fully comprehend in his simple canine understanding. Emily had never been a failure. She had been his partner, his pack leader, his reason for existing, and tomorrow at her funeral, he would ensure that everyone understood what she had truly meant, not as a hero or a failure, but as a soldier who had given everything, including her life, in service to others. The Bronze Star might tell one story, but Rex carried another, a story of loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bond between a soldier and her canine partner. Tomorrow, that story would be told in a way that no words could match. Arlington National Cemetery had witnessed thousands of military funerals, but the gathering for Sergeant Emily Carter felt different. From the moment mourners began arriving, word of the canines' unusual behavior had spread through military networks, and what should have been a standard memorial service had attracted attention from across the armed forces. Colonel Mitchell stood at the chapel entrance at 0800 hours, greeting the steady stream of arrivals. Emily's former squad mates came first, weathered veterans whose dress uniforms couldn't hide the invisible scars of combat. Behind them, a delegation from the K-9 training facility at Laughlin Air Force, base handlers and trainers who understood the unique bond between military working dogs and their partners. Rex had been prepared for the ceremony with military precision, his dress uniform a formal vest bearing his service. Patches and ribbons fit perfectly across his muscular frame, but it was his demeanor that drew attention. Gone was the listless grief of the past week. In its place was a focused alertness that reminded everyone present that Rex was, above all else, a soldier. He looks like he's reporting for duty, observed Chaplain Hayes, as he watched Rex position himself near the chapel doors. Staff Sergeant Williams held Rex's lead loosely, more out of protocol than necessity. The German shepherd showed no inclination to wander or react to the crowd. His amber eyes tracked the movement of Emily's flag-draped casket with laser focus, as if he were memorizing every detail. Emily's parents arrived precisely at 0830. Patricia Carter, leaning heavily on her husband's arm. The past week had aged them both, visibly transforming a proud military family into grief-stricken parents grappling with questions that had no answers. Where's Rex? Patricia asked immediately upon seeing Colonel Mitchell. Right here, ma'am. Williams stepped forward, and Rex immediately moved to Patricia's side, pressing against her legs in a gesture of comfort that spoke of intelligence far beyond. "Typical canine behavior. He's been watching for you," Williams explained, hasn't taken his eyes off the entrance. Since we arrived, James Carter knelt beside Rex, running his hand along the dog's head. "Emily always said you were special, boy. Said you understood things that humans missed." Rex's tail wagged once, a measured response that somehow conveyed both acknowledgement. In sorrow inside the chapel, the gathering defied typical military funeral demographics. In addition to Emily's family, and unit attendees included military working dog handlers from multiple bases, combat veterans from her various deployments, and several officers from the Pentagon who had traveled specifically to honor her service record. But it was the presence of three families in the front row that drew the most attention: the Martinez, Johnson, and Williams, families whose sons had died. Alongside Emily in Afghanistan, their attendance transformed the funeral from a standard memorial into something deeper, a gathering of people bound together by shared loss and complicated grief. Rex's behavior became increasingly purposeful as the service time approached. Instead of settling into the designated area with other military working dogs, he positioned himself at the side of Emily's casket, his body language unmistakably protective. "Should we move him?" whispered Staff Sergeant Williams to Colonel Mitchell. Before she could answer, Master Sergeant Bradley stepped forward. "No," he said firmly. "Rex earned his place there.
Ow.
Let him honor his partner." The chapel fell silent. As Chaplain Hayes began the service, his words spoke of service and a sacrifice of a soldier who had given her life in defense of freedom. But everyone present understood that the real story was more complicated, that heroism and tragedy often occupied the same space in the hearts of those who served as the chaplain. Spoke Rex remained motionless beside the casket, his attention focused with an intensity that seemed to transcend the moment. Several attendees later remarked that the dog appeared to be listening, not just hearing the words but understanding their significance in a way that defied explanation. The first unexpected moment came during the reading of Emily's service record. As her various commendations were announced, the Army Commendation Medal, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, the Combat Action Badge. Rex's ears perked forward at each mention, as if he were connecting the formal recognition to memories of shared experiences. But when Chaplain Hayes announced the Bronze Star with Valor, Rex stood and released a single sharp bark that echoed through the chapel. The sound wasn't aggressive or distressed. It was corrective, as if the dog were disputing the official narrative. "Easy, boy," Williams whispered, but Rex had already settled back into position, his point made in a way that left mourners unsettled and wondering. Colonel Mitchell felt a chill as she realized what she had witnessed. Rex wasn't simply grieving his handler. He was testifying to a truth that the official records couldn't capture. The most powerful moment came when Patricia Carter approached the podium to deliver her eulogy. Her voice shook as she spoke of her daughter's childhood, dreams of military service, her pride in serving her country, her love for the German Shepherd who had become her constant companion. Emily called Rex her battle buddy, Patricia said, tears streaming down her face. She said he knew her better than anyone, that he saw past the uniform to the person underneath. She trusted him with secrets she couldn't share with family fears. She couldn't voice to friends. As Patricia spoke, Rex rose and walked slowly to the base of the podium. He sat perfectly still, his amber eyes fixed on Emily's mother with an expression that seemed to convey both comfort and communication. The gesture was so human in its intent that several mourners audibly gasped. "She's speaking for Emily," whispered Sergeant Rodriguez to his seatmate. "Look at him, he's making sure we understand." The most dramatic moment was yet to come as the service concluded, and the honor guard prepared to escort Emily's casket from the chapel. Rex broke away from Staff Sergeant Williams and positioned himself at the head of the procession. He moved with purpose and dignity, leading the way as Emily's remains were carried toward the waiting hearses. Escorting her observed Dr. Foster, who had been monitoring Rex's behavior throughout the ceremony. "Look at his posture. That's not grief behavior. That's duty." The procession from chapel to graveside normally followed strict military protocol, but Rex had imposed his own modifications. He walked beside the honor guard, his pace perfectly matched to their measured steps, his presence transforming the formal ceremony into something more personal and profound. As they approached the burial site, Rex's behavior became increasingly focused. His head was raised, his ears forward, his entire body language suggesting anticipation rather than sorrow. He was preparing for something, a final act that no human had planned or predicted. The graveside service followed traditional format. The folding of the flag, the presentation to Emily's parents, the three-rifle salute that made Rex's ears flatten momentarily against the sharp reports. Through it all, the German Shepherd maintained his position beside the casket, a silent guardian performing one final duty. But as Chaplain Hayes began the final prayer, Rex moved with deliberate purpose. He stepped away from the casket and walked to where Staff Sergeant Williams stood with the other canine handlers. For a moment, it seemed he might be returning to his designated place. Instead, Rex sat and fixed his gaze on Williams with unmistakable intent. His mouth opened slightly, revealing something metallic glinting between his teeth, something he had been carrying secretly throughout the entire funeral service. Williams knelt beside Rex, confusion evident on his face. "What is it, boy? What do you have?" Rex dropped the object into Williams' palm, and the staff sergeant's eyes widened in shock. Their slightly damp but otherwise perfect was Emily's Bronze Star medal, the decoration she had never worn, the recognition she had never accepted, the symbol of heroism that had become in her mind a reminder of failure. How did he? Williams began, but the question died as he realized the implications. Rex had somehow retrieved the medal from Emily's quarters, had carried it through the entire funeral service, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. But Rex wasn't finished with the medal delivered. He walked slowly back to Emily's casket and placed his massive paws on its edge. He lifted his head toward the gray October sky and released a sound that would haunt every person present for the rest of their lives. Howl that began deep in his chest and rose in pitch and intensity until it seemed to carry the weight of every loss, every sacrifice, every moment of love between a soldier and her canine partner. The sound echoed across Arlington's hallowed grounds, a final tribute that transcended human understanding and touched something primal in every person present. It was the voice of loyalty speaking across the void of death, a communication that needed no translation. As Rex's howl faded into silence, he remained at the casket for several long moments, his head bowed as if in prayer. Then, with the same deliberate purpose that had marked his actions throughout the day, he walked to where Emily's parents stood and sat between them, pressing his warm body against their legs in a gesture of shared comfort. The bronze medal lay in Williams' palm, catching the afternoon light, waiting for its moment of truth. Round the grave, 300 mourners stood in absolute silence, witnesses to something that would be remembered and retold for generations. The day a German Shepherd revealed the complexity of heroism and the true meaning of loyalty. The ceremony was far from over, but already Rex had accomplished what no human words could achieve. He had given Emily's story a voice, her sacrifice a witness, and her memory a guardian who would never let the world forget what she had truly given in service to others. In the distance, another military funeral was beginning, the cycle of honor and remembrance that never ended in this place of heroes. But for now, all attention focused on a German Shepherd who had redefined what it meant to serve, to love, and to remember. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery. As Staff Sergeant Williams held Emily's Bronze Star in his trembling palm, around him, 300 mourners remained frozen in absolute silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Rex sat motionless between Emily's parents, his amber eyes never leaving the medal that had somehow found its way from a locked dresser drawer to this moment of revelation. Colonel Mitchell was the first to find her voice. "Williams, how long has Rex been carrying that?" I don't know, ma'am." Williams' voice cracked with emotion. He must have gotten it from Sergeant Carter's quarters, but how? When? Sergeant Bradley stepped forward, his weathered face reflecting a mixture of awe and understanding. "He's been planning this," he said quietly, "ever since Emily died. He's been planning this moment." Patricia Carter reached out with shaking fingers too. Touched the medal. The Bronze Star felt warm against her skin, as if it carried the heat of Rex's devotion. "Emily hid this from us," she whispered. She never told us about any of it. She couldn't, said a voice from the crowd. Maria Martinez, mother of Corporal Roberto Martinez, who had died in Afghanistan, stepped forward. Her presence at the funeral had surprised everyone, the family of a fallen soldier honoring the woman who had survived when their son Ditmers. Martinez, Colonel Mitchell said carefully. I didn't expect to see you here. My Roberto wrote to me about Sergeant Carter, Maria replied, her accented English carrying the weight of loss and understanding. He said she was the bravest soldier in their unit, that she would die before letting anything happen to her squad. When I heard she was gone, she paused, struggling with emotion. I had to come. I had to honor the woman who tried to save my son. Behind her stood Linda Johnson and Carol Williams, mothers of the other soldiers who had died that day in Ghazni province. Their presence transformed the gathering from a simple funeral into something deeper, communion of grief, understanding, and complicated forgiveness. Seemed to sense the significance of the moment. He rose from his position between Emily's parents and walked slowly to where the three mothers stood. Without hesitation, he sat before them and bowed his head. Gesture so human in its intent that several mourners openly wept. He's apologizing, Patricia Carter said through her tears. He's apologizing for Emily because she couldn't apologize for herself. Colonel Mitchell cleared her throat, fighting to maintain military composure in the face of extraordinary circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing something unprecedented. This medal, the Bronze Star with Valor, was awarded to Sergeant Carter for her actions on September 5th, 2023 in Ghazni province, Afghanistan. She took the medal from Williams and held it up for all to see. The citation reads, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States, Sergeant Carter's heroic actions under intense enemy fire directly resulted in the survival of 6 wounded soldiers and the successful completion of the mission. But that's not the whole story, interrupted Master Sergeant Bradley, and Rex knows it all. Eyes turned to the German shepherd, who had positioned himself once again beside Emily's casket. His posture was alert, expectant, as if he were waiting for the complete truth to finally be told. Bradley continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had been there, who had witnessed both the heroism and the tragedy. The intelligence was wrong that day. We thought we were hitting a small weapons cache. Instead, we walked into a Taliban command post with 20 fighters waiting for USD. Crowd leaned forward, hungry for details that had never appeared in official reports. Emily was point on the entry team, with Rex detecting explosives. When Rex alerted to IEDs in the main building, Emily called for a route change. That decision saved the lives of everyone in the lead element. Bradley's voice grew heavy, but Martinez, Johnson, and Williams were caught in the crossfire trying to reach the alternate position. Linda Johnson stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. What happened to my son? Bradley looked directly at the 3 mothers, his eyes reflecting years of carried guilt. They were pinned down by enemy fire from 3 directions. Emily could have retreated with the rest of us. We had wounded who needed immediate evacuation. Instead, she and Rex held a defensive position for 12 minutes, laying down suppressing fire while close air support was en route. 12 minutes, repeated Carol Williams. That's how long my son was dying while she tried to save him. That's how long Sergeant Carter fought against overwhelming odds to keep your son alive, Bradley corrected gently. She never retreated, never abandoned her position, never stopped trying to reach them. Rex found a drainage tunnel that the Taliban hadn't covered. That's how we extracted the wounded and recovered the bodies. Rex's ears perked forward at the mention of the tunnel, and he released a soft whine that seemed to confirm Bradley's account. Dr. Foster, the base veterinarian, had been observing Rex's behavior throughout the exchange. Remember, she said, with certainty. Look at his body language. He's reliving that day. Colonel Mitchell nodded. Slowly, the after-action report confirmed that Sergeant Carter's actions saved 6 lives that day. But she never forgave herself for the 3 she couldn't save. Maria Martinez walked slowly to Emily's casket and placed her hand on the flag-draped surface. My Roberto would be angry with me for what I'm about to say. She began, her voice growing stronger with each word. He would say that soldiers don't need forgiveness for doing their duty. She turned to face the crowd, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. But I am a mother, and I know what it means to blame yourself for things beyond your control. Emily Carter didn't kill my son, war did. The Taliban did, bad intelligence did, she tried to save him, and when she couldn't, she carried that failure for the rest of her life. Rex stood and walked to Maria Martinez, gently pressing his head against her legs in a gesture of comfort and connection. This dog knows what Emily couldn't believe. Maria continued, one hand resting on Rex's head, that sometimes loving someone means accepting that you can't save them, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is survive when others don't, you plain. Hayes stepped forward, recognizing that the formal service had evolved into something more powerful than any planned ceremony would. The families like to say something. Linda Johnson nodded, accepting the bronze star from Colonel Mitchell's hands. This medal represents everything my son believed in: courage, sacrifice, loyalty. Emily Carter embodied those values every day she served. She walked to Rex and knelt beside him, holding the medal where he could see it. You carried this for her because she couldn't carry it herself, but we can carry it now, all of us, in memory of everyone who didn't come home. Rex gently touched his nose to the medal, then looked up at Linda Johnson with an expression that seemed to convey both gratitude and release. Carol Williams approached next, her voice steady despite her tears. My son's last letter home mentioned Sergeant Carter, he said. She was the kind of leader who made everyone around her better, who inspired soldiers to be braver than they thought possible. She paused, looking down at Rex. He also mentioned this dog, said Rex, was the smartest animal he'd ever seen, that he seemed to understand things about people that people didn't understand about themselves. Tail wagged, one's acknowledgement and appreciation for the recognition. The ceremony had transformed from a traditional military funeral into something unprecedented. Communion of understanding between families bound together by loss, forgiveness, and the recognition that heroism often came with a price that survivors couldn't bear. Patricia Carter walked to the podium, her voice carrying a mother's authority. Emily couldn't forgive herself for surviving when others didn't. But standing here today, listening to these families honor her memory despite their own loss, I understand something she never could. She looked directly at Rex, who had positioned himself once again beside Emily's casket. Love means carrying someone's memory forward, not carrying their guilt. Emily gave everything she had to save lives, and when she couldn't save them all, she gave her own life to guilt and regret Trex wind softly, a sound that spoke of understanding and sorrow. But you know better, don't you? Patricia continued, addressing the German shepherd as if he were human. You know that love doesn't keep score, that loyalty doesn't require perfection, that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is to remember them as they truly weren't, as heroes or failures, but as people who did their best with impossible choices. The afternoon light was beginning to fade as the honor guard prepared for the final ceremony. But before the ritual of taps and the folding of the flag, Colonel Mitchell stepped forward one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed something extraordinary today. Sergeant Emily Carter's service record speaks of heroism under fire, of lives saved and missions accomplished. But her canine partner has shown us something equally important, that true loyalty means carrying someone's truth. Even when they can't carry it themselves. She looked down at Rex, who sat at perfect attention beside Emily's casket. This dog has taught us that honor isn't just about the medals we wear, but about the love we carry for those who serve alongside us. He has shown us that sometimes the greatest tribute we can offer is not forgetting, not forgiving, but understanding that war asks impossible things of good people. Rex stood and walked slowly around Emily's casket, his movement deliberate and ritualistic. As he completed the circle, he returned to his position beside the honor guard and sat at perfect attention, a soldier reporting that his final mission was complete. The buglers' haunting notes of taps echoed across Arlington's sacred grounds as the flag was folded with military precision. But it was Rex's final gesture that would be remembered long after the ceremony ended, as Patricia Carter accepted the folded flag from the honor guard. Rex approached and gently placed his paw on her hands, a bridge between species, between loss and love, between a soldier who couldn't forgive herself and a world that would never forget her sacrifice. In that moment, surrounded by families who had every reason to hate but chose instead to understand, Rex had accomplished what no human could achieve. He had given Emily Carter's story a voice, her service a context, and her memory a guardian who would ensure that the complexity of heroism, its pain, and its purpose would never be forgotten. His mourners began to disperse. Rex remained beside Emily's grave, his amber eyes reflecting the last light of day. He had carried her secrets, delivered her medal, and revealed her truth. Now he would carry her memory, not as a burden of guilt, but as a badge of honor worn by those who understand that love means remembering someone not as they wished to be, but as they truly were. The bronze star would eventually be displayed in a place of honor, but Rex had given it something more valuable than recognition. He had given it meaning, context, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest heroes are those who can't see their own heroism. Through the weight of their love for others, in the gathering dusk of Arlington National Cemetery, a German shepherd completed his final mission for his fallen partner, ensuring that Emily Carter's legacy would be measured not by the guilt she carried, but by the love she inspired in those who served alongside her, both human and canine, in the complicated brotherhood of war.